Well, I had this really long speech that's all UNEs, and I think I'm having to boil it down to 4 things because I don't think I can follow those acts. Good evening, Marrakesh. Good evening, brothers and sisters. This is an amazing evening. Thank you, Mo. It's really been amazing. What is more special is that you've kept that light for us. You've kept it burning, and you've kept it so that we have a light at the end of a tunnel. It's a dark one and it's a long one, but as you said, we're going to get there. What's even more special about this evening is now I get to say there are so many people in this room that I want to be like when I grow up. So yes, I'm still young and I'm still growing. I'd like to speak to 4 things very briefly. I guess to say that in all that we see and that we feel and that we live in Africa, there has been some progress. And we know that the glass is only half full. Maybe in some cases we see it quarter full, but it is some full. And it's that gives us the hope and the possibilities of what can be done. That you can go away for so many years behind bars and come out and still feel that you have the inspiration, the spirit, the passion, the conviction, the courage to speak truth to power and to lead your people out of many miseries, many have been left behind. So progress has been made. It's insufficient, and it's why we come over and over again. We fill a hall like this today because Mo brings us together to talk about what is missing, the thirst for governance, the thirst to do, the thirst to lead, and he chooses us to have a conversation on leadership. And leadership, our President, Host Kola, gave us a full remit of what that could mean. But I think the one word that we came out with, certainly I'm taking home with me, is trust. Trust that you cannot put a value on because it is so invaluable. It is one of the assets that if we ever get a chance to hold, we should never let go because it is what keeps us bound together or otherwise, as we see so much. The challenges today, and we saw over 4 years as we tried to shape the Sustainable Development Goals, that it was important for us to get the narrative right. What was our narrative? And a really difficult task, because we were talking about a narrative that is across the world, a universal agenda that said, we must leave no one behind. And we had to define who that no one was. In my journey in that 4 years, I visited Nauru. And Nauru was a very small country, in fact, the smallest member of the UN family, just to see what it would be like to achieve what their priorities are, to give them a life of dignity, to give them hope. And that really was the benchmark, that it is the smallest, most vulnerable member of your family that you should use as the standard bearer for whether you have succeeded in giving what is a right to most. So our narrative has changed. It's changed from the way we used to do development before. We have conflict, and in the last 15 months in my country, I can tell you personally, 3 types of conflicts in one country. The one where we talk about terrorism. It's in a corner of my country that I grew up in. I know terrorists are not born, but something happened that today, not only do we see the atrocities of terrorists, but we also see how they have got into the minds of young girls and women that they create even more atrocities. That's one conflict, a conflict that must have left some people behind, so much so they didn't have any hope of a future. And so they took everyone down with them, anyone that they could touch. Then we have another conflict, a conflict where people live in the midst of the wealth of our country, but they live in pollution, they live without hope, but around them they see what feeds a nation of elite, a nation where governance does not prevail. And so for them, what can they do but to say, if we can't have it, neither can you. And then we see another type of conflict, a conflict for some who say the science is not there for climate change and that population and its dividends don't matter. And we see land, we see urbanization, we see populations, and they need to be fed. And all of a sudden, those people who have the freedom to wander where they will are caught in the clashes of those who will feed us, and atrocities happen again. So just in one small country, we know that the challenges of conflict are in many different ways not the old ones, they are new ones, and we don't have the wherewithal to do them. We are not fit for purpose today to address them. we have youth, and we see youth not as a dividend, not as an asset, but as a problem, as a burden in different contexts, be it conflict, migration, drugs, trafficking. There's not a good picture to youth, and yet these too are our assets. We also see the loss of hope, the hopelessness in the eyes of many who don't know where their next meal will come from. For mothers, from fathers who turn away from a responsibility that they have no choice, they cannot fulfill. And so there's a lot of hopelessness, there are many, many challenges. But with all of those, that narrative that we addressed, we agreed that we had to find something to respond to. That, for us, in the United Nations, was the Sustainable Development Goals, was the climate agreement in Paris, was the financing agreement in Addis Ababa. To most of the world, those are pieces of paper, resolutions. In my country, as we would say, a lot of long English. Our job now is that there is a demand that we put that to action, that we implement all those words, all the process that we went through to engage everyone. And everyone was involved in this. I know because I walk through many corridors, airports, streets, and people say to me, do you remember when we argued about cities and whether they should be a part of this agenda or not? Or whether Goal 16 on the rule of law should not also speak to strong institutions. And I speak about that process that got us something that we could hold on to try to right the wrongs, because it took leadership. And it took leadership at all levels. It took leadership of the General Assembly to say that, yes, this was not something they wanted the Secretary General to prescribe, it was something they wanted to be involved in. That took some courage, 193 people to agree 17 goals. And I can tell you that in that process, even today, many think 17 goals are many. We started with about 500. And to get consensus in a family of 193 is pretty difficult. However, today, I'd like to sort of contextualize the leadership that we need, not just in the United Nations, because it represents all of our countries. It represents a demand that we should make of our leaders, that we signed on to a solution to the many challenges. And so we have to hold them accountable. We have to hold the United Nations system accountable. Each and every one of us that goes to a country to say that we're here to assist. And if the country fails, what is our part in that collective responsibility for success or failure? And so in the UN, we see the ideal, we see the reality. And our job is to try to bring the two together so that people can have a peaceful and prosperous life. And so when Antonio Guterres rang while we were talking about water and sanitation in India to say, would we join his team for a journey of the next few years to try to see if we could right those wrongs, if we could make a difference. My first reaction was that, what am I going to tell them back home? And we have so many problems, and, I was just thinking about the problems in my backyard. For him, I asked him, why would you take such a job? I mean, this is the most miserable time possible to take a job like this. Why would you do it? And the words that got me to join him were when he said it was the moral imperative. That is leadership. He didn't explain what all the reasons could have been, how he could fix maternal mortality, or what he could do about gender, or how he could put cities to work. He said there was a moral imperative. And that, for many people, doesn't mean much. You look at him and say, well, you don't know what he's talking about. This is not idealism. But it is, because we need to do that. The United Nations has everything going for it. It is the only platform that you can come to where everyone has an equal voice. It has many structures within it that help us to strive for peace, to avoid the conflicts. Is it working today? No, it's not working as it should do. And that is why we come in and we hope that with the experience, with the networks, with everything that we have, we can hope to succeed, to lead, to support 193 countries to do what is right, to fix the system, because it is a moral imperative. It is that we don't have any choice. It is that we have so many leaders. And for years, I've been in the United Nations where leaders have been from the South, where we have named them every name that we can think of. They're not doing what they should be doing for their country. We've held them to account. We have barred them from sessions. We've suspended them. We've tried to jail them through the international courts. But today, there aren't any borders to leaders like that. They are North and South. And so we all have to stand up and really talk about what we need from leadership and those results that we want to see. I thought about, Mo set me up to come here and speak after these great, great, great people. What are the key ingredients that I'd like to share? To share with you that I think that if we don't have them, there is no silver bullet for leadership. But if you're not leading from the front, then you're not leading at all. So to have the courage of your conviction, to speak truth to power, all those things are really tough to do. It's easy to criticize. It's easy to pull down everybody. It's easy to forget that no one is 100%. But it's really difficult to take that decision that you will go against all odds because you believe that there is a destination that you have, and that is to make people's lives better. So some of these ingredients that we talk about, the core values that the United Nations has, that you play in a team, that you don't exclude anyone, that you engage at all times everyone at the table, even if you have to dine with the devil with a long spoon. Because if that's what you need to do to make a difference in people's lives, then that's exactly what you do. There is also, deep inside every one of us, a story to tell. And using that story often helps us to get from A to B. But many of us don't tell it. In Africa, it is not the culture to tell those stories. Some of them are painful, some of them are happy ones, but whatever they are, it is for someone else to tell your story. And sometimes these things will have to change because this world has changed so much that if we don't tell our stories, if we don't use the strengths of what has happened to us in good times and in bad times, then perhaps we never will understand that we are each and every one of us bound by that humanity, one that we should hold on so close to. I'd like to move to what I think is going to be crucial as we all walk out of this room, thinking about in terms of leadership, because leadership must happen at all levels. Horizontally, vertically, it must happen at all levels. It must happen in the community, in the village, in the family. It must happen in the United Nations, in businesses across the world. We have leaders here, and if you want to know what are the criteria, the ingredients, or the key things that make them leaders, and I suggest every one of them writes them on a page, because I'm pretty sure that no one sets out to be a leader. You have something within you that you believe in, and it is that belief that you take forth, that you use for others by putting people at the center, by ensuring that we must have strong institutions to deliver everything that we need, not necessarily the processes will come. The technology for that is there, the academics are there for that, the science, the processes will come, but strong institutions with people who believe in service, who believe in delivering through these institutions for health, for education, for justice. So putting people at the center, but making sure that these institutions are full of young people in institutions with a career that they see the light at the end of the tunnel. And to practice what you preach, to practice the values in the daily work that you do. When I listened to the music that we heard today, these are people practicing what they preach. They touch your hearts, they inspire you to do. So what better life could you have or want for? You are leading through your music. And then to really talk about the measure of success. What is your personal measure of success? Is it how many promotions you get? What the number of noughts are in your account? The difference that you make in your family? What is it really that you measure as success? And let me just end on what I would measure as success. I've thought about this for the last 5 weeks that I've been in office. And for me, what keeps me awake every night is that I have the distinct privilege and honor of being in an office where I am in decision-making, but I am a woman. And in 5 years' time, when I step out of that office, what will I say that I have done for women? What will I say that I have done for young men? What will I say that I've done for the population? And so, what I do is I take my story. I take my story to the United Nations and I tell it to the 193 people in every situation that I have to crack a nut, a negotiation, an item on the 5th committee that even I don't understand. I get in there and I'm looking for the eject button because it's such a tense room. And what I take is my story. I am a woman. I'm from the South. I'm from Africa. I'm a Muslim, a proud Muslim in a world where Islam today means extremism. And so I intend to change the face of that. I also go as a single parent with 6 children. And there are single parents from I go where, for years, it has been, for me, very difficult to say, I didn't get the education I needed, because everybody thought, with this posh English accent, she has to have had a good education, she's a PhD. And so I had to work much, much harder. But my story is the story of millions of women. And if I don't use my story to make a difference, then I think that I have no business being in a place where it is demanded of me that I show leadership, because we know we have to make a difference today and not tomorrow. And I hope that you will all join me in, yes, there are many that are they're tired and they're old, and one day soon shelf life will expire, including mine. Can we make that transition? Can we actually hand the baton to the teeming youth who have a right to be part of today, because this is their future? I know what I did at 22 years old. I know how frustrated I was at the old people who were standing at a podium like this and lecturing. And I wanted to be a part of that, and I fought to be a part of that. But I think it is our duty for us to hand over that baton, to inspire, to speak truth to power, to really say, I have absolutely everything to gain by doing the right thing. And the worst thing that can happen to Amina Mohammed is that she's asked to go home. Well, let me tell you something, that's not such a bad place, because there's even more to do at home. So whichever way I look at it, I'm not a loser. Thank you.